Ernest Golden. I have a middle name, LaFarge Golden. I'm from Athens, Georgia. I arrived in Hawaii in 1943. War workers to rebuild Pearl Harbor. I came as a civil service worker.
What are some of your chores or your duties and what you arrived here as a war worker? What were you doing?
I had no special skills, so along with 400 other blacks that arrived here in 1943, I was assigned to a labor gang and was assigned to work on Ford Island as a laborer, not having any special skills. I did sign an 18-month contract, which was the standard in those days. You signed it for 18 months. So my first contract was for 18 months. I did do 2 contracts, and I was assigned to Ford Island. I recall that at the time we entered for a work assignment, we had to enter the main gates of Pearl Harbor. And as I entered the gates of Pearl Harbor, as I looked to my left, I saw the devastation of the bombing that the Japanese had done. And as I looked at the devastation, my first thought was to return and cancel my contract, because I did not want to work with all that pipes, broken ships. But we passed that and then went to the landing, and from there we took the ferry to Ford Island, and there I worked my first 18-month contract.
And what number of other young black men were with you in that capacity? How many would you say during that time?
When I was assigned housing, there were some blacks who had come 1 year prior to my arrival in Carroll. We were all assigned to a segregated area at Civilian Housing Area 3, which later became CHA3 for short.
And where was this housing that you lived in? You lived in the government furnished housing, or where did you live?
The government, once you checked in, you arrived and you checked in. We arrived on a troop transport, and on that troop transport there was something like 6,000 men, civilians, military, civilians, and of those 6,000, 400 were blacks. The Navy was segregated at that time, and we came from the East Coast. From Athens, Georgia, arrived at Mare Island in January of 1943. January of 1943, arrived on the West Coast, and from Mare Island we went to San Francisco, if I recall, awaiting a convoy that would take us to Pearl Harbor. And for 13 days we were on the docks in San Francisco. The Japanese at that time had control of the Pacific. Their submarines had control of the Pacific, so therefore we had to wait for a convoy. And so after the 13 days on the ship, we were finally able to get assigned to a convoy. And for 9 days, we zigzagged across the Pacific and arrived in the territory of Hawaii.
And that zigzagging was to avoid detection by the U-boats, right?
Yes, to avoid submarines. Large convoy. A convoy made up several ships, but the Japanese did have control of the Pacific at that time to their submarines.
So your housing was here, was it bunker style or was it barrack style or was it, did they provide you rooms, individual rooms for privacy or what was it? How was it?
The housing that we were assigned to were dormitories type houses. Usually units, for some reason, the units usually had four, four apartments. Uh, they were modern, very modern type homes, not barracks, very, very first class. Uh, but they were segregated.
They were
They were
segregated
segregated.
and based on, segregation was based on race.
Segregated, yes. I mean, racially segregated because
Mhm.
that this was before integration. This was,
In the dormitories, or were husband and wives, or were there any married couples?
at the time that I arrived here, there may have been some wives were not allowed at Pearl at Civilian Housing Area 3 at the time. It was later that husband and wives were allowed to come. Only bachelors, so we were assigned to bachelor accommodations, and that ratio was somewhat disturbing when you realize that women were very rare, and at the time also, some of the social life in that period. I think the Navy, who was in charge of the territory of Hawaii at that time, sort of made allowances for prostitution, because prostitution, to a certain extent, was legal in the territory of Hawaii. Um, you on your what they call your J day, that was your day off. First thing you did was go downtown and get in line for a 3 minute uh, stint with a prostitute. Um, this was the way of life. So early in the morning, when you got up, you put on your clothes and everything, you got your I think it was $3. Food
Hmm.
filled.
So the government provided you the $3?
No, only through your employment.
Oh,
Now
okay.
I remember what's interesting for me is that at the school that I attended, high school that I attended, the ratio I attended a class that graduated in 1944, and of that were 44 students, graduating students. 12 of those students were men, were boys. The rest were girls. So I share so very often with the shock that I faced when I arrived here, having come from a ratio of 14 out of 44 girls, and that was, I had a field day until I arrived here, and all of a sudden the whole cultural thing changed. And here I am now having to compete, so-called, for the attentions of what prostitutes, which was not to my liking. The first time I went down there, I decided that no, this is not for me. So I, thereafter, I tried one time, was unable to perform in hours of prostitution. So I never went after that.
Hmm.
But we did become creative later, a group of us called the Ten Bachelors. And we created a social organization, whereas we would invite, uh, especially women from various bars and nightclubs and that sort of thing, to our private parties. And this in turn gave us the opportunity to have access to female companionship.
Hmm.
But no, the house of the prostitute was looked upon, like was allowed, admitted, whatever terms you want to use, by the government and by the local heads of law enforcement officers.
Hmm.
There were some books that came out about this period and about what was happening. There was one called Maybe Stover, and that book came out about speaking to those days and what it was like. Later, after, and I think President Truman was the one that somehow or another allowed integration in the Navy, and I'm toying with the concept here, so bear with me. But I think at that time he removed the racial segregation that had existed in the military at that time. And at this time, then wives were permitted to join their husbands. And this may have come about around 19, again, my 1944, 45. And so wives were then permitted to come and join their husbands in Hawaii.
Just going back a bit, did the city participate in giving cards or notifying these sailors that these had cleanliness and health wise? Was there certified prostitute houses or
yes,
houses?
the houses were certified. It was a strange thing that existed. It seems that the Navy and the heads of the Navy and the local law enforcement joined hands together to control the houses of prostitution and prostitution in general. At one time, I recall, we went downtown, which most of us did, on our days off. You had three lines that you would get in. One would lead to houses of prostitution, the other would lead to a theater for movies, and the third would lead to a liquor store, because whiskey at that time was rationed. And they had some local brew, but by and large, you didn't have access to mainland quality whiskey, that sort of thing. So one of those three lines you would get in, and this is where you would wind up. Without knowing, it would stretch around the block, incidentally. But eventually, wives were allowed to join their husbands. And another story would possibly be related to that period. And I'll briefly share it with you. One of the things that I say, and I don't know if others share my thinking, but of the 400 of us that arrived in Hawaii in 1943 along with me, I was from the South, and I was getting away from what I call Southern apartheid, Southern prejudice, discrimination, and this opportunity, signing up for civil service work, gave me an opportunity to get away from that which I was running from.
That is discrimination.
Discrimination and segregation. And I share this with you, is that I dare say that of the 400 that was on that troop transport along with me, most of them, if they would choose themselves, were from the South also. Some more, maybe some indirect, but mostly direct from the South. And because of that, we crossed and arrived in Hawaii, and we did something which I have been trying to rectify. We made a major mistake, and that is we deliberately lost our identity because what we were trying to get away from was segregation, discrimination. And once we arrived into the territory of Hawaii at that time, we used, and I use this term only, the Pacific Ocean possibly as slaves had used the Underground Railway to get away from slavery during slavery days. We used the Pacific Ocean, I say, as such, and we deliberately lost our identity. And we made a major mistake.
And you say we African American men,
blacks. Did.
Or what was it?
My thoughts about why we did what we did. No, it was getting away from something. We were running away from something that was almost unbearable. We were running away from Southern segregation,
Mm-hmm.
and this gave us an opportunity. The bombing of Pearl Harbor gave us from the South, possibly not all of us, but most of us, that opportunity to get away from that which we were running from.
Mm-hmm. Segregation. When you would visit the downtown, the prostitution, were you allowed? Was it just
Oh,
all women, white, black, or was it acceptable?
houses of prostitution, believe it or not, were segregated also.
Okay.
In other words, blacks didn't go in the same prostitute, the same house of prostitution as whites did. They were segregated also.
And what about the prostitutes themselves? Were they white, Chinese, Asian?
There may have been a combination of all of the above. I do recall there was one woman who had, I can't call her name now, one black woman that was a prostitute that was quite well known. I cannot recall her name. That would help with the story. But
She was a black lady,
she was a black
but a
woman who was
prostitute.
a prostitute.
Did she own it, or she was just
No, she
a
was
worker?
somehow another worker. I don't know who paid her, who her pimp was, or who she may have been working for. But I do know that there was one that I knew. Others were some local girls, local women, some Howling, some local, because there
Hmm.
weren't that many black women in there.
Now, that was downtown. The housing, the layout. We were looking at some foundations over here. This facility that we were looking at, possibly, is it called Cam 3, or what was it? The
CHA3,
CHA 3.
Civilian Housing Area 3.
What did that consist of? Was it a laundromat, washroom, bathrooms, or community grocery store? What was there?
We were housed in, as I said, 18th and 19th Street, which were um, pretty decent type of accommodations. But there was a small shopping center on Main Street.
Okay.
And in that shopping center, they had, I recall, one of the people that I got to know, a black man, had a business there in that shopping center on Main Street. A man from Chicago named Louis Hughes. Uh, but by and large, the shopping center consisted of a liquor store and some other services, of which I don't recall patronizing that much.
Mm-hmm.
The theater that we attended was down at close to the barracks, the apartment where we lived. There was a theater down there, and there was a garden, a beer garden. There was on the Navy property itself, and its civilian housing area 3. There was a beer garden. There was a banquet hall which had had a theater and had movies. Um, there was a boxing arena. There was a mess hall. All of these things, I think, to a certain extent, I think, was segregated. But to what extent, right now, escapes me.
Mm-hmm.
Whether the mess hall was totally segregated, I cannot speak to. But because the law of the land was segregation, I'm almost certain that these facilities also followed the same theme. Um, but these were the things that were available to us, away and apart from the small shopping center on Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Were there uh, black officers? And you were a civilian, but were you working under the command of a black officer, or in some of these capacities, as a civilian, where they would have a?
there were no black officers at the time
Mm-hmm.
uh, when I arrived in Pearl Harbor. I share this story with you. And trying to get away that which was unbearable for me in Athens. I went to, from Athens, I think the first trip was to Louisiana, New Orleans. I was there for about 2 weeks. And after I'd been there for 2 weeks, this was 1942,
Mm-hmm.
I was in New Orleans for about 2 weeks, buddy of mine and I. And we worked, bombed around, but left and was on my way back to Athens. We took several trips away from Athens, it seemed. We'd
Right.
come to Athens and get regrouped, and as soon as we could, we'd leave again. So we went to New Orleans, stayed for 2 weeks, and listened to jazz and did all that good stuff. And then finally, we went to work. First of all, usually, this buddy of mine and I had a certain system that we used. We were what I call professional busboys. And what we would do is, as soon as you arrived into a town, you went to work at a restaurant or hotel. And because of this, if you arrived in the morning, the first thing they would do was the chef would feed you, send you to the kitchen. So the first thing you would do was eat. So we had this down to a fine finish. My partner and I was named Milton. Milton and I would go into this town. So we arrived in New Orleans, and we worked in, that was a John Hotel in New Orleans. On the name of the street will come to me in a moment. The John Hotel was one of the main hotels there. So we checked in at the hotel in the morning. Funny thing about it, we left Athens. I don't know how much time we got. Milton and I left Athens and we went to Atlanta. At that time, there were about 5 of us, high school graduates. We went to Atlanta, where we hooked up with my father, and he fed us the first morning we got there. He took us out to breakfast, but we ran short of money. So of the 5 of us, we decided that 3 of them would go back to Athens and get some additional money because we were short of funds. So we went back to Athens to get money, and Milton and I checked in our bags and everything like that after my father gave us breakfast. And we, to kill time, I think we went to a movie, bought some, what they called in those days, were kisses, that's little brown paper stuff. We bought some kisses and clicks, and went to the movies, checked the bags in. But our buddies never came back. So now we're between a rock and a hard place. We could not go forward because what we done is checked our bags through to New Orleans, right? This is where we were going. So here we were. So we had to take the bus. And unfortunately, we got one of those local buses, not certain buses went. The bus that we caught stopped at every corner. It took us 3 days to get from Atlanta to New Orleans, eating clicks and kisses, little brown wrapped up paper, right? So the first thing we did, my stomach was growling. So we went to the John Hotel and went to the chef. The chef said we were signed up for a busboy. And true to nature. Said, go in the back there, go in the kitchen, and the chef will feed you. And he went into the hotel. And there was this long steam table with eggs and bacon and ham and grits. And I had to turn away because I couldn't face the food. I was truly. But we went to work. And this settled in New Orleans for a while. Like I said, 2 weeks. And then on our way back, again, hooked it up to it, went back to Athens now to regroup. On the way back, we went to the post office. They said to sign up for a civil service job. We went on the way back on the bus. We picked up a Times magazine, and in that magazine they were advertising civil service jobs in Bermuda. So we went to the post office to sign up for it, but they said no, excuse me, there are no jobs available in Bermuda. However, we do have uh, positions at Pearl Harbor. I, at the time, had no idea of where Pearl Harbor was. I had no concept of it. I'm from Athens, and Hawaii was 6,000 miles away from where I was. I had no concept whatsoever
Mm-hmm.
of what Hawaii was like. But we asked, what is the pay? And at the time that I was working part-time and going to school, um, I was getting, I think, $3 a week, working after school and working weekends, Saturday. Everything's closed on Sunday. A boutique, I was working for a guy, a boutique. So he said the jobs were Pearl Harbor. And so we asked what they pay. And I think he said 72 cents an hour. And at the time, 72 cents an hour, when you consider we had been working for $3 a week, 72 cents an hour was a major, major salary.
And that was your salary when you arrived here?
Yes.
72 cents
72 cents an hour.
an hour. And you worked, what, an 8-hour day or longer?
Oh, we could, I don't know. I think that they had several shifts. I think we had, if I recall, we probably had 3 shifts, grave shift. So I think we were doing 8-hour shifts, especially the assignment where I worked when I arrived in Hawaii, as I had no special skills. So I was assigned to a labor gang, and we were doing yard work and that sort of thing as a labor gang. So we did not do grave shifts and that sort of thing.
I see. You had,
yeah.
so you get off work, you were on the town. You were out there raising ruckus.
Trying
Yeah.
Trying to beat